Hello and welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Agents of Change with myself, Dmitry Loukine. This podcast is about kind of meeting people from all walks of life that have kind of been in leadership roles and kind of been the catalysts or change makers when it comes to AI, automation, and technology and that sort of thing. So today we've got a really interesting guest, someone I met a couple of weeks ago, and just off the initial chats, we just completely hit it off and probably could have spent the whole day chatting about all sorts of ideas and innovation, particularly with AI. So without order ado, I'd like to welcome Andrew Grego, formerly the head of digital of Cargill. Would love to kind of bring him on just to basically get a sense of, what's happening in the broader industry around commodities. From the little I know about commodities, I know that Cargill is known as a bit of a silent giant that is everywhere, but also keeps a pretty low profile as well. So really great opportunity here. So welcome on board, Andrew. How's it going?
Thanks, Dmitry. Yeah, great to come along to your podcast. I've listened to a few episodes since we last spoken, so it's great to be here.
Yeah, beautiful. Glad that they got you here as well. So that's a compliment in itself. So, mate, for the listeners' benefit, would love to just get a bit of a background on kind of like how you got to where you are and kind of like, how you got to the most recent role and that sort of thing. So, yeah, need to get some background.
Yeah, sure. So we'll go right to the beginning very quickly. I grew up on a cattle and cropping farm up in Queensland, a couple of farms off the coast near Rockhampton, whatever. Did an engineering degree, so I didn't end up going back on the farm. I worked in, sugar industry and the mines for many years, and then got an offer to do an MBA down in Melbourne Business School, and did a couple of pitches with Rothschilds, and then ended up at this ag commodity business called AWB, who was subsequently bought by Cargill in the early 2010, 11, 12 sort of region. Probably the most relevant to your audience is around digital transformation. For the past probably 7 odd years, I've sort of been dabbling with AI in various forms. I can go into that in a bit more detail. I led the digital transformation for Cargill. It's a large multinational business. In the late 2010s, so 2018, 19, there was quite some fear around startups. I've disintermediating Cargill from its supply chain, and that was when startups became. I got involved in a couple of business accelerators then, and that fear of startups was really what drove Cargill to initiate digital, and I led that from 2020 to 2025 this year. I've since left Cargill, so I'm out on my own now doing some advisory and some other things, potentially startups. So that's the background.
Yeah, brilliant. And for the listeners' benefit, like when we talk about Cargill, like how big is Cargill? How big of an organization? And when you say head of digital, is that for all of Cargill?
Just Australia. So just Australia, but I was involved a lot digitally globally with the agricultural markets business globally to develop portals for their supply chain. So portals for farmers to sell their crop, and portals for storing and managing the warehousing, and portals for the buyers or the traders that would buy from Cargill. So Cargill was a key player in that supply chain from farm gate to flour mill, feedlot, fish farm, whatever. So that, and really globally involved in the strategy there, somewhat, and really just responsible for the Australian transformation.
I reckon that would be such an interesting role. I mean, farming, I think from what I know, there's a lot of technology in the world of farming these days. But during your time, that's kind of like when technology was really kind of breaking in. And I mean, from the coffee we had most recently, like adoption and change management, I think you'd have some really good war stories around that, right?
Plenty, yes. Yeah, so sort of my AI journey really started back in probably around 2018 when I was building a crop insurance business for Cargill. So started that in 2015, and in 2018 we were partnered up with Swiss Re, a large reinsurer, and those guys, the quants, really smart people, were using AI or machine learning to smooth the data, weather data, and a whole heap of other inputs into a model. We introduced a frost product for farmers so that they could ensure crop loss against frost. At the moment, really, there's only fire and hail, still is. So, and the quants there in Zurich were using sort of machine learning to smooth that data to feed into their stochastic model. That then, I dabbled with a few of those. We also had startup competition globally for who could predict crop prediction. So what's the production in any country? We had about 17 players from Europe and US and Australia, and narrowed it down to two. One of them was an Australian company, Digital Agricultural Services. Proud to say we tried to invest in that startup. It's not a startup really anymore, but failed due to term sheets. But we've since went on and had a good long relationship with them, and they help with crop prediction, and they use a lot of AI models, random forest, a whole heap of stuff that they do to determine whether the crop that the satellite is looking at is wheat or barley. That was the hardest. Picking canola was quite easy, and vision tech back then, but now it's that sophisticated that humans, I even still struggle at certain times of the year picking whether that driving past whether that's a canola, whether that's a wheat or a barley crop. So nowadays it's that good, that from a satellite image, this can be done. So that's the next thing. And then we did a bit of chatbot stuff, which we with the team in India. I went across to Bangalore. We have a large office over there, and we sort of talked about that, but never really got off the ground. And then we did with a partner out. We thought one of the best use cases here was to predict when farmers would come to market. Farmers face enormous challenges. They've got the weather unknown. They've got the markets. They're in Australia, particularly, we're beholden to, no subsidies and the like, and no government intervention. We're beholden really to the market. So farmers have some challenges there to deal with, and understanding when they were coming to market. So we built a model that would use weather and previous transaction history and commodity markets and pricing, and we got that to reasonable accuracy. But and this is one of the lessons that I really learnt was, change management just gazumps tech all the time, no matter whether your model's sophisticated or not. But so we ended up abandoning that particular model and used a sort of a simpler email to the sales team sort of idea, a bit of prediction there, and it was very basic, but that's what got more adoption.
Wow.
It's interestingly enough, just because we're meeting them where they are. So I absolutely agree. Change management's key.
Yeah. And I think taking a step back as well, I mean, in terms of, with AI, I mean, I think like some of the examples you shared very much revolve around prediction, and that's where like a lot of the value probably is, within that industry and kind of some of the bigger problems that you're biting off and chewing through. But for you personally, when did it first come onto the scene, and when did you kind of get the first kind of like dopamine hit of holy crap, look at this new technology, and start thinking, oh, this I can take this and start solving some bigger problems?
Yeah, I look, as I mentioned, sort of the first hint when I became aware was about 2017, 18 with the Swiss Re quant guys. They just handling so much data to ascertain the risk that this particular farmer was experiencing, and so to model how to price crop insurance.
Yeah.
Um, and I thought that was my first insight, and I worked with them to, and the underwriter here in Australia. That really gave me a sense that this is a powerful tool, machine learning. But so that was probably the awakening.
Yeah.
And then to see DAS, the Digital Agricultural Services, and Anthony Wilmot's a great guy who owns that and runs that, CEO of the business. Just to see, and Sam Atkinson, who's leading that Earth observation area. Just to see how that vision model to really determine between wheat and barley, it just blew my mind that could actually happen. We'd been doing it internally with canola, but externally these guys were able to differentiate that. And production and cropping is what's planted in and what is the area of that planted versus plus the yield times the yield equals production, right? It's pretty simple. No one's been around, cropping for 20 plus 25 years. No one's really got the area planted well until this time.
Yeah.
So the actual what farmers across Australia had planted was always a mystery. It was surveys.
Yeah.
And they're open for, I've done this or I haven't done this, and the Australian Bureau and, traveling, ground truthing. We had to do a lot of ground truthing to help with this. And that's another key.
Yeah.
And it wasn't perfect to begin with. But yeah, those are probably two examples where real value was becoming apparent.
Yeah. Yeah. And just jumping to the change management, because I think there's two really interesting kind of perspectives there. Obviously, creating this mass innovation within Cargill's for the farmers, like in terms of getting the farmers onto the technology, like what are some of the strategies? Because I'm sure like this happens with a lot of B2B type businesses, or even B2C is just like, right, okay, we've got all this technological horsepower, but how do we actually get people to use it and see the value? Because a lot of people are comfortable in the way they're doing things. And if it's worked over the last 100 years, I'm sure there's a real traditional way of doing things. But yeah, trying to instigate that change. Is there any kind of like lessons learned or anything that was kind of like a good story from your perspective?
Yeah, I think the first thing that every farmer will say is, I'm more interested in what's happening in the field most of the time. There's different types of farmers, and I'm bundling them all together, but there's this larger segment that is, more, and that's their revenue sitting out there in the field. So they're not, going to be engaged like I am, or, potentially the audience is around sort of digital technology. So, the first thing is that, it's to make it simple. This simplification wins basically. And that's not easy because you give away some things and you make things internally more complex with a simplified. So it's like a seesaw. I see it as, the simpler you make it, the more complex internally it is. So that is key. The really being able to clearly communicate value to the farmer. I think is another key. So user experience and simplification.
Yeah.
Being able to explain value, where they get value, and ultimately also sort of ground truthing is part of that as well, which is really just customer discovery in some parts, but trust, trust around, have you got their back when it comes to security? Trust have you got their back when, I can't, I still need help and support and stuff like that. So, there are probably 3 or 4 things that really farmers want to see the value clearly articulated, want it to be simple because they're not going to be, using the tool. That some parts of the tool, like pricing, I want to see that every day, but the other parts of the tool, it's, the cycle where in agriculture, it's an annual cycle, So harvest only happens once a year. Some places in Australia, there's two harvests in row cropping. But so, yeah, it needs to be simple, easily picked up. And so there's what a lot of this is all pointing to is the opportunity for AI, to be honest. So but those are some things that around adoption. Another thing was we initially thought, actually face to face was the way to top of the funnel. It turned out actual email campaigns were better. The farmer and the way that they want to experience that high speed data around pricing was SMS, or so really going to where they are is the key, and determining for each segment, whether you're dairy or what that is, you've just got to meet them where they are, and finding that out is customer discovery and then A/B testing and all that sort of stuff. So
it's quite interesting. I mean, it's not very often these days you hear that the preferred means of communication is email marketing campaigns.
Yeah. And, some of that is sophistication, like I know, and I would put my wife in some of this too, sort of this perception of what farmers are like. Let's say there's 20,000 farmers, row cropping farmers, and another 80,000 that, livestock, and then there's dairy and all the other ag sectors. But just picking row cropping, 20,000, probably there's 7,000 of those 20,000 that are reasonably sophisticated, probably out there on their own, doing stuff that in some cases in particular would blow your mind, that they're tech savvy. They are tech savvy because, they've got $1 million harvesters and variable rate, spreading fertilizer and water management. And these guys, at the top end, these guys are sophisticated, but, there's a chunk in that sort of middle that aren't as sophisticated, and you've got to design for all of that.
Yeah. And then on the other side of the spectrum, obviously being in such a large business and, without pumping your tires up too much, like innovation is just something that, I think you're quite an innovative bloke. And I reckon there would have been either just yourself or a couple of people like you in the organization that were always pushing for more technology, for experimentation, for innovation. So talk me through how that kind of went and kind of the strategies you had around, because I mean, it looks like you started off in kind of like broader operations and then got pushed into the innovation startup kind of sector because they probably couldn't contain you, and you were just kind of on that path. So I just wonder what was happening in the earlier days when this technology was presenting itself and how you're getting buy-in from the other executives.
Yeah. So I helped build a network of storage facilities across Australia in the early 2000s, and then did some financial service innovation, crop insurance and advisory business, and a derivative trading for the sophisticated farmer, some over-the-counter products there. But So then at that time, it's really this fear of startups. So actually one day I got 6 startups that I knew. One was the Up Bank, the guy that started the Up Bank, who's now, bought by Bendigo, just an amazing guy. And a couple of other, mentioned Digital Agricultural Services as well. I got them in to just do a 1-hour presentation, and I think the exec team just were blown away with the size of their team and the progress they had made, using digital. I think that was a real eye opener, and at that time, there was a fear that we were going to get disintermediated. So that in, 2018, 19, it was probably more fear driven that, and that sort of galvanized, the exec to support me. And we had, legacy systems, messy. There were 26 of them all over the shop. Data wasn't in one place. So I implemented Cargill has a global now data lake, huge, and we have our own AWS, service to support that. Well, they do. Sorry, I'm no longer with them. And so we did a lot of that work to just get the foundation right, and then into the So plus the other thing was really interesting was just this mindset change to long, drawn out, business cases. So I became the business case, in the mid 2000s with this financial services, PowerPoint presentations and, meetings, and eventually it's now more agile than it was back then. But, so robust business cases, Monte Carlo analysis of, cash flow, just sort of all this is how big businesses need this to be done to manage risk. And, so going into those details was I had to do that to get buy-in. So the fear was one thing, and then detailed planning and business case building was another. And then it's, having the right team that people trust will get something done. And, there was a gap between the other thing, teams, is the gap between the commercial part of the business and the IT part of the business, and who owns what. And so managing that I was sort of in the middle of this. Had enough background to understand IT and some commercial experience. So sitting in the middle there was sort of trying to bridge that gap, and it's so much better now than it was, and led by a lot of other people as well globally. But those 3 things stand out, which is the fear of the external environment and what was going on, and then eventually ending up with sort of this building a robust business case that people could understand and trust, and then the support of the restructuring around teams and how IT and the business work together, and those things were critical to getting the momentum to head into this digital transformation.
Yeah, righto. And I guess in terms of what you've been exposed to now coming out of Cargill's, and I'm sure you haven't been sitting still since you left as well. You probably listened to a bunch of podcasts, been to meetups, met a whole bunch of leaders and that sort of thing. What's your views on kind of the current state of where things are in terms of technology, AI, some of the observations and opportunities that are at hand? Keen to hear your views.
Yeah. So I'm first off, is a big picture thing about Australia. I'm just frustrated that we're lagging behind, to be honest. I think like the US, China, many of the Southeast Asian countries, even Europe, with all its regs and the leaders in privacy, I feel like we're behind all of those, and again just caught up in political issues. I don't want to go there, but it sounds like the electricity and carbon markets again. But anyway, so that's one observation, one frustration.
Yeah.
Another would be that ag is just primed for digital twin, which is where a lot of it at the end game, a lot of the AI in the world is sort of the big AI companies are talking about this. It just seems absolutely mind-boggling that you can create a digital twin of the globe and everything that's going on in it. And that's sort of and robotics is only going to exacerbate that as well and make that even easier to occur. But so that just where that's going, but it just means AI is a fundamental change in our, where we're heading as a race. And I think that's so exciting to be in. I think in the next couple of years, I think here in Australia, I think agentic systems. That's where everyone's starting to get familiar with ChatGPT and prompting, but I think for routine decision making and routine sort of things with plenty of guardrails, starting simple. Mostly, it's probably not agentic. It's just a workflow that's automated, and then it will be, there'll be an agent that can actually make a decision on their own, but there'll still be a human in the middle validating. I think that's going to happen. And then part of that is and this is really interesting for farming particularly, is that, to get a farm up and going or in an ag business, you sort of need to surround yourself with a lot of these experts because you can't be an expert in everything. And I just think the way that agentic systems are going to multi-agent is another thing that makes it well suited to a farm and to ag. So that's sort of near term. And then, there's this comes back to data a bit, but I think the sensor environment, weather station environment, just the amount of personalized weather stations that are out in Australia now. The US is well covered, but Australia isn't, and there's many other countries that aren't as well. But given that Australia is very high impact of weather, I think IoT edge is going to be well suited to ag in the sort of, that seems to me to be a little bit further off. Personalized agents for farmers, so that can really help them with. We suffer in Australia. We suffer from. Is part of the reason I joined a business accelerator called Rocket Seeder. Found that was just turning research into commercial outcome. We're very good at innovating, but we're not so good at commercializing. And I think that's now, and AI also feeds into this makes it a little easier to do that, I think. So I'm excited to see there. And then there's the messy supply chain. I think in the future, agricultural markets, and food miles and have a big opportunity to streamline the supply chain. And it's a complex beast. And I've had many colleagues back when I was at Cargill. We have lots of humans working in that space that could be made more productive with AI tools to, slot booking, to picking which stock to bring to which customer, and those sorts of decisions, optimizing warehouse costs, and because that's a big, optimizing rail and road usage to get, we're probably 500 kilometers from any port minimum, on average around Australia. we use a lot of train and or rail and road to transport the crop to export because we're a net exporter. So that, and then shipping and all that sort of stuff. Absolutely, there's space in there for AI to, I think, to just bring the data to more real time and operational or automate some of those mundane tasks.
Yeah, yeah, agree. And you do wonder, like in an organization that big, for example, like how much, like across the operations, think about how many manual processes are in there and how much human error there is in there as well. And of those processes and people doing those jobs, like how many of them actually really like them? And if you could enhance it with automation,
Yep.
AI, or other technology, and then enable those people to go work on more strategic work. Like that's and that could be everything from very low levels right through to kind of management and that sort of thing. Very broad brush kind of statement, but I think that's the opportunity that exists in a lot of companies. And if you can standardize and enhance some of these big processes, it really can unlock the business and profitability and all that sort of thing. Easier said than done, though.
Yeah. It's finding the getting an early win with the right first use case.
Yep.
I think, and your team certainly have capabilities to really help select that. I think that's a key thing, getting an early win, because there'll be times, when it's this trust thing that it's not going to be perfect. People have a mental model that's going to be, it's IT, it's got to be perfect. This is a new model, and you've got to accept that it's like a human. We get things wrong, we make mistakes, and you've got to be sort of become more knowledgeable and trained up to become closer to perfection, never getting there. So that I think is just the mindset around trust, and that really, that's the change management thing that's I saw with a lot that people would not trust the system basically until it was perfect, and this is just the mindset you're going to have to adapt to.
Oh, this is very topical for me. I mean, there's like two camps, and this is something I experience on a daily basis actually, is you're always pushing for innovation. You're always trying to tread the line of like what hasn't been done before or experimentation and that sort of thing. And as you're having breakthroughs and you want to demonstrate it to the people that would benefit from this so much, everyone kind of wants the innovative solutions, but they want them completely finished and perfect. And it's just like, well, how do you expect innovation to work if you're not pushing the boundaries and if you're not challenging? You can just sit and wait for it to get handed to you, or are you going to do something about it? And I kind of always fall into that camp of just, I'm always trying to push the boundaries and then show the progress. And it's about, it's finding that balance of how do you take away some of that responsibility and empower that or pass that on to those other people so they start pushing it. Because if you can get that collectively in your organization, that kind of culture, then I think that's where the real progress comes, right?
Absolutely. And I think that mindset around sort of, it's okay to fail as long as you're learning something and you're going about it and trying something else. That wasn't there in 2000 and early. That's only sort of a recent sort of thing with new management, etc. So I absolutely agree. You've got to be pick the right use case early, have an early win, celebrate that. When you do have a loss or something doesn't go right, you've got to say that's just par for the course, and what did I learn from it? So it's sort of that mindset or that way of working is critical to that change, particularly in big organizations with embedded cultures that take time, and that needs leadership. And so I think Cargill's certainly on that journey. I see that. Some people may think it's too slow, maybe for me. But others that are, responsible for keeping the lights on.
Mm-hmm.
And, those guys and girls that are doing that, they would probably say it's fast enough, even too fast. So, it's a balancing act, but yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of like leads on to my next question. It's more around kind of like advice to leaders. So, if we imagine an executive in a company, whether it's small or large, and they're sitting there thinking, geez, we are doing things the old way or the legacy way. We're still so manual, and they're just not having any luck kind of like breaking through to the other kind of key decision makers. Like, is there any advice for those kinds of people? Because I'm sure you've been in those situations before. Like, how do you
Yep.
handle that, and how do you? I think it goes into that kind of quick win kind of mentality.
Yeah. Yep. You have to pick the business problem first that, is the most impactful or whatever. I don't start with tech. People want commercial outcomes and are, commercially minded, and they're often the ones keeping the lights on. So you need to help them with their problems is going to be a business impact. So technology should not be part of that to start with. Simplicity scales best. So start really simple. And maybe you don't pick the most impactful, it's the second most impactful or whatever, but something that is simple. And particularly with agents, this is, things can go wrong very quickly in automation with agents self-determining, and small errors get larger and larger. So start with something simple, and maybe it doesn't have maybe it's just an automation, not an agentic system. I think that is absolutely key. And the third would be, change management is 70% of the work in most corporates.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're running the show in a small business, and can be a bit more deliberate and make it compulsory for change, and that, I think, just you need to make sure that that's reflected in your budgets and your resource allocation, that change management's going to be a big part of what you do. I think that's probably three things from a AI implementation. In ag, I'd say, farmers are fundamental to and you've got to respect their domain expertise. So that is critical for that. Ground truthing data, particularly ground truthing sort of things on the ground. It's amazing what may work one place does not work in another. Ag is sort of cyclical. One year, it's not like a tech thing where you can test it today and change it tomorrow. You sort of don't see the outcome for some time, potentially. It's like a budget cycle. If I'm employing someone and how many budget cycles have you been through, which are annual cycles? Or ag's just inbuilt that way. So that's somewhat frustrating when I look across at tech companies that can test something so quickly. So you've got to be smart about how you test things, because otherwise you're waiting for a year. What else would I say? Probably, ROI, measuring that and being really explicit about what's your return on investment. I think everyone should be on that. But the other thing in ag in particular is, I think ecosystems work better than empires. I think there's so much of partnerships and sharing data. We've got Australia hasn't quite got there, but we're getting closer to this capability. Everyone's got these small, incomplete silos of data, and they're thinking that's really protect that. But I think a bit like open source software sort of. I think sharing, partnering is a much better solution to make progress than building an empire. I think in ag particularly. But maybe in agentic systems, I suppose, coming up. What would, if you were going to tackle some of those and your business, you need to have a human in the middle. Start with automation, then go to an agentic system. Low stakes. That is, I think, fundamental. That's I would advise everyone to do, and I'm sure you do that with your clients as well. It's probably it.
I think some big nuggets of gold amongst that as well. Something left field. I did a podcast on the finance side of things a couple of weeks back, and there was a real interesting strategy there for the same situation, but in the finance sector is, if you're an executive and you know that this technology and change is ahead of you and it's inevitable, but you can't get people on board, and you might not be the most technically savvy person yourself, you just know this is the future, maybe like an alternative strategy is to try and find people lower down in the chain, but are kind of like, like super users or using this technology and getting that person to almost be your kind of like your champion or kind of like early adopter. And you can kind of use that person and bring them in and just get them to demonstrate how they do things now versus how they traditionally used to do it. And it kind of just demonstrates that art of possible. You don't actually have to invest too much in it, but if you get that person into the room and be like, hey, here's just a small demonstration, but what's possible, and this is just something we haven't really invested in.
You've just gone full circle from the name of your podcast, but that agents of change, finding the agents of change in the business, they're the gold, to be honest. And from a spark that can then go a bit further, absolutely. And if they've got expertise or passion around that, I think. But the one thing you've got to be careful about with that is just making sure that they're business passionate, not just tech passionate. But that's absolutely they're getting a agent of change that understands this, that you can demonstrate for others is a really good change management technique.
Yeah. Well, I think that pretty much covers everything off. I think some really interesting insights into an industry that I kind of just know at a very high level. But I think there's a lot of technology in there, and I think it's only going to help bring Australian, farming to the kind of like world stage, or completely, help it compete, to some of the other major regions. So thanks for your time, mate. I think people who listen to this will get some benefit, and if anyone takes anything away super valuable, I would advise getting Andrew out for a coffee, because this is just scratching the surface. But mate, appreciate your time. I wish you all the best. I'm sure we're going to have many more catch-ups in the weeks to come. But I wish you all the best, and appreciate your time.
Thanks, Dmitry. Much appreciated. Enjoyed it. Thank you.